And now Miss Honey's hopes began to expand even further. She started wondering whether permission might not be sought from the parents for her to give private tuition to Matilda after school. The prospect of coaching a child as bright as this appealed enormously to her professional instinct as a teacher. And suddenly she decided that she would go and call on Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood that very evening. She would go fairly late, between 9 and 10 o'clock, when Matilda was sure to be in bed. And that is precisely what she did. Having got the address from the school records, Miss Honey set out to walk from her own home to the Wormwoods' house shortly after 9. She found the house in a pleasant street, where each smallish building was separated from its neighbours by a bit of garden. It was a modern brick house that could not have been cheap to buy, and the name on the gate said, "Cosy Nook." Nosy Cook might have been better, Miss Honey thought. She was given to playing with words in that way. She walked up the path and rang the bell, and while she stood waiting, she could hear the television blaring inside. The door was opened by a small, ratty-looking man with a thin, ratty moustache, who was wearing a sports coat that had an orange and red stripe in the material. "Yes?" he said, peering out at Miss Honey. "If you're selling raffle tickets, I don't want any." "I'm not," Miss Honey said, "and please forgive me for butting in on you like this. I'm Matilda's teacher at school, and it's important I have a word with you and your wife." "Got into trouble already, has she?" Mr. Wormwood said, blocking the doorway. "Well, she's your responsibility from now on. You'll have to deal with her." "She's in no trouble at all," Miss Honey said. "I've come with good news about her. Quite startling news, Mr. Wormwood. Do you think I might come in for a few minutes and talk to you about Matilda?" "We're right in the middle of watching one of our favourite programmes," Mr. Wormwood said. "This is most inconvenient. Why don't you come back some other time?" Miss Honey began to lose patience. "Mr. Wormwood," she said, "if you think some rotten TV programme is more important than your daughter's future, then you ought not to be a parent. Why don't you switch the darn thing off and listen to me?" That shook Mr. Wormwood. He wasn't used to being spoken to in this way. He peered carefully at the slim, frail woman who stood so resolutely out on the porch. "Oh, very well then," he snapped. "Come on in and let's get it over with." Miss Honey stepped briskly inside. "Mrs. Wormwood isn't going to thank you for this," the man said as he led her into the sitting-room, where a large platinum-blonde woman was gazing rapturously at the TV screen. "Who is it?" the woman said, not looking round. "Some school teacher," Mr. Wormwood said. "She says she's got to talk to us about Matilda." He crossed to the TV set and turned down the sound, but left the picture on the screen. "Don't do that, Harry," Mrs. Wormwood cried out. "Willard is just about to propose to Angelica." "You can still watch it while we're talking," Mr. Wormwood said. "This is Matilda's teacher. She says she's got some sort of news to give us." "My name is Jennifer Honey," Miss Honey said. "How do you do, Mrs. Wormwood?" Mrs. Wormwood glared at her and said, "What's the trouble, then?"